Hey, I'm Greg, and this is Ask
Mom
and Dad. It's been a while since we've done that. You got to be on cue, right? Get that right?
Yeah, I've lost
Can't help it. It's a thing. It's been so long. We're so glad he came here to join us, and we know we brought you all with us this morning. Welcome to our little show. Okay.
The studio audience is excited.
We've got all the studio audience is thrilled to be here, except for that one cricket in the corner.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're doing pretty good. We're so glad you're here with us this morning. You can shut up now, cricket. Thank you. Moving on. I'm turning down the volume slowly like a professional does. We were talking before we started doing this about what we're going to talk about because there's a lot of things that have transpired.
And then,
frame.
Between that and now now we know we have to do $20,000 worth of dental work, and that's all that life's about right now, right? How to build, how to save for all the luxury items that your body says it needs.
Why buy a new car when you can buy a new car in your mouth?
Not going to get you anywhere.
Not
it
quite
might
that much
allow you to chew food for a little while longer.
See, here's the thing. Because it's dental work, we don't have to do 20,000.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Unless we actually want to.
Yes.
Keep
as long
our
as
teeth.
we like soft food, we're fine. Decisions. Steak or puree. It's all up to you.
So we got through the wedding. I think we were building up to the wedding last time we talked about it. I don't remember for sure. That was a really great thing. We got to enjoy a whole new set of relatives that are now kin to us or, related by marriage, which
we got new kin.
And we're excited. Yeah, we're excited about because they're great people.
But the wedding thing was interesting because we got to spend a lot of time with our kids. We have one unmarried child out of 8. So that's all we have left. We got one more we've got to sell. So any attractive young female out there, character, of course, attractive in character,
for how much we're selling him for?
Yes, we're selling him off. We'll sell him off to the lowest, highest bidder.
Don't tell him that. That'll be sad because he.
No, he unfortunately he has
turned 21
his
by
own,
himself.
That's right.
Poor guy.
He's always been the child. We forgot by accident.
No, we didn't forget him. He just wasn't with us.
Let's just talk about the wedding for a minute because one of the things that we did enjoy about the family that we have come to share a family member with through this was some commonalities in our families that we found resonated with who we are in Christ. And I'm curious, what are some observations that you made across the board? Because when I say that who we are, and if you were to look at my family of origin and your family of origin, and then who we are as a family ourselves, I would think my personality leans a lot into how our family developed, but your family of origin has a whole lot more to do with how our kids have enjoyed and experienced life and what's the word I'm looking for? And traditions, and character, and what defines us. So what do you think? What are some things that were interesting and that resonated with us between these two Christian families?
Well, for me, it was a lot of similar upbringing in small town, rural community that was centered around the church. I believe a lot more rural communities tend to be, first of all, there are a lot more families that have generational people staying around, so you kind of hover around the church. Well, then that has become a traditional part of your family life. So it's not that not the same like with the city. You might choose to be a part of a church, and now you've kind of begun this new community. But in these more rural communities, you've carried on traditions or carried on generations of church going. So your community's already kind of built in. So I think that's what I sensed was the beginning of that, because that relates to my mother's family, especially where they grew up kind of nearby farms and homes, but then they revolved around what was their community church. So then because of that, though, it's ingrained in them as part of their existence, part of their foundation. So you can know that when you've met a family that is that's their center, I guess, maybe. You can relate, and you feel immediately connected because you can relate to that, I guess. So the extended family of this family we met almost immediately. We got to meet at least both sets of both grandmothers of her of our new daughter-in-law, Madison. So that immediately, you feel kind of connected because they have a similar understanding of life, of literal worldview is centered around God himself and the perpetuation of that faith in their families. Then we met, of course, one of them has military in their family, so that was also another connection. Then we have just a very similar, even lifestyle. Like there's no suburban up and coming, getting the best and whatever. Just it's maintaining proper homestead for all the family to come join. Those kinds of things. So those are all kind of related to what I values that are very similar. So I think that's why there was a deeper connection, especially for me. Now, I don't know about you. I guess I would enjoy your take on it too.
Well, for me, it was the sense of you're pretty much what you're saying, just from a different angle. I just see an intact family where everybody loves one another, and it's not fractured.
Not something you grew up with, really.
It didn't seem fractured. Mm. And I'm not saying that they haven't had their struggles, because as we got to know them, they've had their struggles, but as all of us have. But there was a commitment to the common family and a love that the children had for the parents, a respect. Yeah. Children of the parents. Like I said, you're coming at that from a cultural side standpoint, but I think there's something deeper.
I'm saying the culture of a rural community usually has the church as the center. So those things are built in, those values of respect and of revering the parents and of honoring the elderly and those kinds of things. So that's
I agree that that's built into the culture. But we have more than a fair share of rebellion from that. People who come out of those cultures that just run away from it hard and want nothing to do with it. And so that's why I'm saying.
You hear a bunch of country songs that saying, "Take me home," that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but some of those
most of them miss it, at least, even if they run away from it.
They miss it, but they have that litany of whiskey, wine, and women and broken marriages or whatever that.
Well, I wasn't talking about country music in general. I was saying there are country songs, there are songs written to, right. I wish I was back home, because I miss that, even if I've been rebellious toward it.
Well, and a lot of times when someone gets older, they remember that what they had was something of value. Foolishness in youth can cause them to run away. I'm thinking that, and again, not knowing any particular more details than what we do about this new family. I know in our family you and I have been very fortunate that it's, at least at this point, our kids haven't had those far runaways. They've had crisis of faith, and I guess that's kind of where every family, every child has to have a moment where their relationship with Jesus is challenged in their own being, in their own core, and they have to decide, what will I do with Jesus? Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I'm thinking about that, I'm saying, okay, well, I see a family, and they are older. All their kids are older, and then we've still got a 21-year-old as of yesterday, day before yesterday, but
their kids are mid-20s though.
Their kids are mid-20s, babies mid-20s, so their kids are not old, not young, but some of them have lived long enough to have had a little rebellious streak here and there, but there's still a strong sense of faith about them, at least and familial connection about them. I don't want to give all that to country living,
I wasn't saying that.
And you're not totally saying that either. I understand that. You're saying Christ-centered church. Family,
I was saying what I related to, what I feel like I saw in them was the smaller rural communities who are centered on the church being the community strength, the community center. Whereas when you move to urban areas, that doesn't tend to be true. You might find a community, you might kind of connected to your gym or to your, your kids are playing soccer, or maybe it's located at your school. There are things like that. I'm just saying, in a rural community, it has tended in the past to be revolved around the church that has grown up as generationally. So I guess I'm confused how you wouldn't agree with me.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just digging at it a little bit more and just trying to figure, because I think for me, what stands out is the binding love that the children had for the parents and how they wanted to serve them.
But where is that taught? That's exactly what I'm trying to get at.
I think it's taught in church. Yeah, I don't disagree
with
you. Those are biblical values.
Those are biblical values.
But I know a lot. But it's taught in church. But as a pastor and a pastor's wife, you and I both have been around plenty of people who've taught these truths, but their children have not adhered to them. And I've used constantly the scripture where God says to Isaiah that he's raised children and they rebelled against him. So I'm not necessarily placing any blame. I'm just wondering what that key component is.
Yeah.
That for some families
Well, I
we've
was
met where
trying
it
to get
does seem
at,
to hold together as a whole unit rather than just fractures.
yeah, I was trying to get at the generational support for that value, though, makes a difference
So
sometimes,
layers deep.
especially if, yeah. So we met both in this case, our daughter-in-law's father's mother and the mother's mother, and they both had the same set of values and of respect and of honoring their life, the life of the worldview coming from the church, and the understanding of God's love for them. So that itself creates that kind of community around, is what I'm trying to say. So then
Okay.
even the rebellious ones, which we know there was a little bit of rebellion, sons or whatever, but they know they
Even
can
with
come
her
back.
own.
They know what they know what is truth. They know what parents and grandparents have stood for. So when they come back into that atmosphere, they have to consider that. And it has to either be that they once again rebel, once again turn away from that, or that they come back into it and embrace it, because they're going to be faced with it no matter what. So I think that's its own accountability structure, I think is all I was saying.
So like the sins of the father are generated and visited upon the third and fourth generation. Same thing's true about the mercy or the grace or the godliness or the righteousness of the parents are passed on to the third and fourth generation. We were talking in our Bible study this morning about Abraham and Isaac and Abraham sending his servant off to find Isaac a wife, and how the question arose in the study about, why was the servant praying for the God of Abraham and that kind of, and it came up in the conversation that there was something so rich. And when you think about it, Abraham's community was centered around a very, very large group of people by this point in his life. Because there'd been all of his servants and slaves, and it's not slaves, and family members and generations of stuff, not just his little piece, but all the people that served and lived alongside him. He moved in these massive groups of people. And there was a culture there that even his servants had seen his encounters with God, and it began to rub off on them to where they were able to represent him and represented him and prayed these prayers of faith. Lord, show me who she is when she comes up.
Well,
This kinds of things.
that's a good point. Influence. Maybe why I'm saying smaller, the rural communities, because most of these communities come up from families who have settled them. And a lot of the communities are built based on that kind of idea, where the influence of one or two families who planted that area or, acquired land in those one regions, a lot of times it's perpetuated through the generations. If that has been passed on, like you're saying, and passed on appropriately, which I guess would be, like you're saying, appropriate grace, appropriate, there's accountability structures, but there's also grace. So then someone feels loved, but they also feel like they've messed up. Well, they can come back and find acceptance and love. So if that's continued, then a community's built on those parameters. Then a lot of times you can sense it, like you're saying. And in that case, servants or people who are an extended in relationship to the family. For me, it would be probably people who in the region have known that family, and their reputation comes with it.
Don't mess up
This is
the
a
name
two-
of the family in the community kind of thing.
Yeah,
Well,
kind of, because if it's associated with great things, with goodness, with love, with acceptance, and maybe accompanying. Like I was thinking of, as small of a example as this is, I remember there were a couple different family groups located where my mom grew up. One of them was the Berries, and they were really close. My mother kind of saw them as a second family. But one of the things that I remember, Homer, who was the patriarch of that family, the one particular family, I mean, he was a businessman. And so he would admire things in other men. Of course, he was also a godly man. He, was honoring to the church and was honoring to God in his life. But one thing he pointed out about my grandpa was that he had grafted 5 apples into one tree, 5 different types of apples into this one tree. I just remember that being kind of a reputation my grandpa had. My grandparents also had the reputation of always having a place around the table for an extra one. They always had it literally open so that people knew if they went by the Hinkles' home, they would be able to find a meal or find a welcoming attitude and heart. Anyway, those kinds of things, exactly as it is a community builds up around those, then the influences reach out and they influence the next generations too. That is somewhat an accountability like we're talking about. I don't know that rebellious kids stand up against that too well some of them will try, and it depends, how
Well,
they're
they either
received
have to
back
leave the community entirely.
completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they often do. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
happens. And so, but yeah. And I think, you can't, I don't want to ascribe it to just luck, but, it's not that at all. Sometimes we just have the facts that God's blessing rates smiled upon our family.
That's a lot of prayer, if that's what you mean. Not got anything to do with luck. Luck has
Well, that's I just
nothing
said
to do.
I don't want to ascribe it to luck.
Okay, good.
I said
Good to
the
know.
favor of God is a lot of times what gives us those things too.
Absolutely.
But what you're talking about is important, because one of the things that a friend of ours always says is, we find our identity in Christ, but our identity is shaped in community. And so when I think about that, what you're describing to me is how these people function and interact with one another is dependent largely upon the fact of the communities that they're in. And we discussed a family community, a church community, and a cultural or small town community. In your case, you said it's easier in a small town because everybody knows everybody. So it's really, really hard to get away with it, or whatever it is. You're more than likely not to want to misrepresent the name of your family. All of these things are putting pressures on you that the world tells you to get away from.
Well, yeah.
But what we're saying is this is a virtue that should be encouraged, is to have people be in places where they are not, where they're encouraged to act toward, I can't think of a better word, but toward their better virtues, towards the things that are more inclined to build up rather than to tear
I would
down.
also say there's a
less
deeper,
selfish, more selfless. Go ahead.
Right. That's what I was going to get at. There's also a deeper sense of if your family and generationally a family has drawn near to God and has in whatever ways tried to honor God in their living, in their setting, one man, one woman, married, having children, these kind of specifics that God has blessed and has said He will bless, then there's a certain thing too. I remember the family we're talking about, even Madison's parents had some struggle early in their marriage or somewhere in their marriage there, where so much so that they lived in separate houses for a little while, it sounds like. But because they were in the same community, and even if both of them went off to college at various times or whatever, they chose to come back and submit themselves to that community. It sounds to me like neither one of those families, those extended families, would have let them just give up or walk away or be, in the sense that they probably knew if we come back or if we stay around here, say it, we're going to need to figure out who we're submissive to ourselves, to what we want, to the fact that marriage is hard, or, I don't like this person right now, or that kind of thing. Or am I going to submit to the larger picture, and the people that I've been around know that marriage is hard and they've struggled through some things, and they're seeing me and they're encouraging me. You know what? If you get through this, you'll be so thankful. Those kinds of so those submission factors do matter, and ultimately in this situation they did, and they would look back and say they were so thankful. But yeah, it was hard, or there was hard points, or there was, but thanks be to the Lord, really, who puts those people around you when you want them to hold you accountable. They will, or they will be there to support you and undergird you, also hold you up when life is a struggle, or when life is really hard, or when there's loss, or when there's, so communities that pull together, but also in the name of Jesus, who gives us that life and strength and the wholeness and the picture of what is blessed by Him, what is going to be the blessings of following Him and being obedient. Then those things are going to come a lot more prevalent into our families' lives, and we'll be able to pass that on even to the next generations if we're allowing that, is what I'm trying to say, if we're submitting to that. So I feel like that's part of it too. Because you can be, like you just said, you can be in a community, but it takes a lot of even self-sacrifice to allow that community to affect you and to be who you rise up to that standard.
Right. Well, and excuse me. And another thing to consider is, community is powerful. We know it's powerful because even in our societies today, there are people who are seeking to mislead us and mislead our children and others, who use community as a tool to shape them. Right recently we've got battles in the Supreme Court as of this recording, arguing over whether or not parents have authority over their children and their education and what's being taught in the school system. And what is a school if it's not a power broker of community, where a teacher is influencing a group of students who put pressure on each other to perform a certain way, one way or another. So, having control or say in our own communities is important in that regard. But also, once we deal with the fact in similar situations where these kids wind up in situations where their peers try to isolate them away from their families, and they build a structure of love and love, quote, I'm doing the quotes here, around community that says, we love you more than your parents. We do. And they convince people that this is more attractive, that this lie.
Well, again,
generally it's a lie.
Depends
It's
on
more
what
attractive.
what's the foundation of that community? Is it just grandpa did, so I must, or, so-and-so did, so that must be the best way? I mean, because biblical communities, I'm giving it away. Church communities are based on the Bible. So the Bible is the staple
Absolutely.
foundation.
Right.
It's not that because people are flawed and make mistakes all the time, and in reality hold each other to a higher standard than they can even do. Those kinds of sillinesses can break up communities. But when we're falling back on the Bible, who is our truth, and God himself, who is our truth, who is going to hold the standard up that only he can hold us together, can be our life, can be our, then it's authentic. And that does make a difference too. Because rural communities can be built on biblical, or on a church structure without a biblical base. I've seen that happen even in my own small town. But if it's
without a biblical base, you can take Mormon communities. They're the same thing.
Right.
They have a churchy structure, but the theology's wrong. And as a result of that they reinforce that, and they wind up having a huge attrition rate over time because people, I think there's an innate need in all of us for the truth, and Mormonism doesn't stand up to truth long term. Some people make it to the grave, unfortunately, believing that, but not in whole. It's just not. It doesn't hold up. But when you deal with Christianity, it seems like what we were talking about earlier is that people who wander off tend to be drawn back to it because there's something innately crying out in the wilderness for them to return. And so I think that's there. What I found, and the reason I find it interesting is that this, like you said, like we said, most of the children that we've dealt with are at least, some of ours are older, so in their 30s and younger than in their 20s, yet trying to or seeking out living in a way that is moral and upright and desiring. I don't know their whole, for our side of the family, I can say they're living for Christ as far as we can tell. And from what they're confessing to us, and what they tell us, right? And what it appears to be, at least the image that's being given to the parents on the other side of this conversation is the same. And our conversations with the family, that's who they are as well. So,
or even if nothing else, the desire. Yeah.
There's a desire to live in a way that is upright and that is honoring to God. Because upright is such a tricky word, because even I got into that today as like one of the things that Jesus attacks is a strong word. Jesus laments over the Pharisees is that they have lost the sight of the people they minister to for desire of fulfilling the law. In other words, they're so busy paying attention to getting the rules right, they fail to understand that what Christ wanted from us, what Jesus came for, what God walked in the garden with Adam and Eve was not a law, but a relationship. And Jesus said, the law's not that hard. It's just loving God and loving one another. That's ultimately, if you think about that statement, that's what he's basically saying. It isn't no big deal. It's just loving God, love one another. You do that, everything else falls into place. And if you just realize that means that every decision you make is a relational one. Every decision you make is built upon whether or not it's still going to be within the parameters of the barriers or the boundaries of what is best. God defines that for us in Scripture. But you're going to love someone wherever they are and help them to find God's best for their lives. I think in that regard,
like you're saying, kids drawn back to that have really somehow tasted a true unconditional love, whether it's a parental love, but even a parental love, usually for an unconditional understanding or that draws a child back. It's going to have two aspects. It's going to have a disciplinary aspect as well as a full grace-oriented aspect. So there's going to be two different complete things that cause to draw a heart back. I even see that in Christianity. It's not like we want to just be, we don't want to be fully embraced with no consequences. Also, we don't want to fully, believe that all of our consequences are going to be. In other words, we want the protection and we want the forgiveness, but we also want to be confronted with our own improvement. Maybe that's the best way to see it. Or, so in other words, a true good parent wants to discipline, but at the same time embrace. So they're going to give them the parameters, the boundaries that are safe,
Right.
and the even the punishments that would keep them from harm at the same time as draw them in to a grace-centered love that makes them feel close and accepted.
Well,
So it's anyway, it's a
I mean,
whole
I talked
picture
about
as
that
well.
this weekend with Nicodemus. Not Nicodemus. I'm sorry, with Thomas. Jesus was there and he embraced who he was. I mean, he showed up specifically for him after appearing to all the other disciples, and Thomas wasn't there. Jesus, Thomas is like, well, when he shows me, gives it the old, well, prove it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so Jesus shows up and goes, okay, dude, here it is, proving it. But then he doesn't leave him there, right? He calls him out of that and says, now what? And he responds with it, right? He says, my Lord and my God, and he believes, and he embraces Jesus, and Jesus comforts him in that moment. But then he says to him, you believe, now blessed are those who are going to come after you, chase after
who are
these
not going to see and yet
who
believe.
won't have what I just gave you and believe anyway. So he calls him up to become the missionary that he eventually does become himself. So the same thing is true, I think, what you're saying too, is that meeting them in that and embracing them. I lost my train of thought on that, but am I in the right ballpark
Yeah,
with it?
well, and think of the prodigal. The prodigal, what I was trying to give the example of is he goes home because he knows he said, even the pigs eat better than I'm eating right here. And my father's servant will be better than I'm experiencing.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is going back, knowing the father's welcoming him, having in the back of his mind, come back to me, at the same time as knowing he deserves the punishment that he should get, that kind of thing, or the treatment that he thinks is low or whatever. I'm just saying any good experience of a child with a parent knows that they're going to get both ends, but if they've found that, if they've experienced that, then they want to go back to that.
Right.
So I was thinking of just these rule settings, like you said, that many rebel against. Most all of them, though, have ultimately had good home life experience and true love, true unconditional love that has come from Jesus, wants to go back to that.
Yeah, and I
even
guess
if they've had that rebellious spirit at one point or another.
Yeah, so when you're telling it from the from that they're seeing what they've had and they want to go back to it. And I was coming at it like from the other side where Jesus is coming and ministering to them in that moment. But they kind of both meet in the middle, right? So you've got Thomas in his story. He wants it, or he wouldn't have come back and met with the disciples, and he wouldn't have been there that day when Jesus showed up among them. He still was among these people wanting to believe. I think he wanted to believe what was true, so he was still hanging around, which is kind of your story, the where you're telling it from the prodigal son story. He's off there knowing what was and hoping that it'll be, that he can at least be among that again. And he comes home and finds out he's fully embraced into it. Whereas the same thing happens for Thomas. Thomas is there hoping for something. And then when Jesus shows up, he's fully embraced, and both are restored to what God intended for them to be at the same time. And so that binding of the relationships that were there preserved them even in dark times.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I'm meaning by that is people who've come out of that sort of environment, they know that that's best. They know that's better, even if they've run away from it.
And they run off like the prodigal son and go, what the heck? I'm eating pig crap.
Yeah.
What's going on? How did this happen? How did I get here?
And that's why I was kind of using that illustration of the songs that are written about wanting to go home. Because if you genuinely experience that, then even going out to, quote, experience the world or to find whatever ambition it is you have, usually you still long for that. If you've
Right.
truly experienced what I believe God has to offer through the church, through his people, through people who are authentically in love with God and want his best and are living according to his word, then that's always attractive, even in the middle of someone's rebellious thinking that they've got other things they can find somewhere else. They
Right.
usually either regret having left or long to get back.
So I guess my opening question, the opening salvo of questions was, what did we do right? And that's very arrogant of me to say, or not, that's not what I'm trying to say, actually. What we've been fortunate in that rebellion in our household hasn't been massive. And what we seem to have, and what you and I identified with Judah's new in-laws, is a commonality of family type, which was cool for, if we were like matchmakers making a match the old fashioned way, we couldn't have picked it better.
No,
it was
definitely.
like,
we couldn't.
okay, God can be a matchmaker too.
It was
This is
very,
awesome.
very much a blessing.
And not just on the couple side, but on the whole family. That we could live in an encampment together and probably just get along fine.
Well, I legitimately think maybe we hit on that exact thing at the end there. It was more of we would love to believe that we operated like the father of the prodigal, that we were standing there waiting. The kids have known that. They've been given what we could give them in the sacrifices we made for them. But we've always said, we aren't the one that can love you the best. Jesus can. We aren't perfect at any of this either. We're struggling just like you are. But the father standing on the porch, waiting for the child to come home, I think all of us felt that or have either related to that in our own families, or we've hoped and prayed that would be how our children felt, so
Right.
that they could go rebel a little bit or test the waters and yet long to be home.
So you're saying
That's
we
my
gave them
prayer.
permission because it was safe. If we go off and do this, we'll be okay. They'll take us back. They told us the story.
No,
They
I
probably
don't
decided
know.
it's safe to go do
I
something
just
stupid.
think enough discipline kind of instills that in a child. They know they're safe, but there are boundaries. They are not allowed to just break every rule for their own safety and sake. They have been given these parameters that are right and good. Once they bust out of those and decide, I don't really want those, like I said, I think when they're out there, they're going, no, I'd rather have those because I felt safe, I felt loved, I felt cared about, even if that included some boundaries that were probably good for me. I believe kids that are brought up with that understanding they really are allowed to experiment a little bit, and always at the back of their mind know, well, that's not good. Well, that doesn't mean that. Well, that doesn't really, fulfill me. When you find Jesus, you find his perfect love. You find that people aren't perfect. There's nothing better. There's nothing out there that meets that need. There is nothing that compares. And I think if families can accomplish that in their own home a little bit to get that message to their children, that you're going to be loved the most when Jesus loves you, that you're going to be accepted the most, that yes, there are some parameters that make you feel safer, that he has put out for your best, and that will help you know you're identified with him. But those are going to be for your best, not to make your life miserable. Anyway, I think kids that grow up understanding somewhat that don't go too far from home, or they return.
And I think that's the key, right? Going too far. I mean, you and I have been in ministry for a lot of years, and so we've seen people that are far, far, far away, and they don't even see a way path back to their family, nor do they feel like their family would receive them back. So, for us, I think that's always been a priority for us as a family. Is we've always wanted to have our kids feel like that they could turn to us and they knew they would find an open hand and grace.
But in reality, I don't think we've ever met anyone that would tell us that they had that sort of upbringing and they can't go back. I don't remember any of those stories.
You're saying the dysfunction had to be high for people to.
Well, no, I'm just saying we've met so many other ones that their dysfunctional upbringing they don't want to go back, and it was because they didn't have those things, and most of them just because we've worked and operated in the North and the Northwest where there isn't a lot of, to me anyway, of what I was describing about a rural community revolving around the church. That has lost its thing. It's no longer that. It's revolved around knowledge or around this or that ambition. Or even for your children, it sounds all great to make sure you put them in all the soccer programs there are, or all the ballet programs, or all the whatever, but ultimately, that's no foundation for them.
Right.
That doesn't give them anything except a little bit of skill, maybe in an area where they can, for a time, achieve something, but that's not going to last.
Right. So you're saying build the foundation of character, their faith in God and character, and make sure that they know that they're going to find that.
Well, that's
we're going to
where
be honest with them and love them.
Yeah, that's where they're going to find that acceptance, that actual belonging. We've talked about that word before. People want to belong, but they don't want to belong for superficial reasons. They want to have a deep sense of purpose and why, And I think,
I was going to say, so for me, okay, so this weekend I'm talking in church about Jesus meets you in your family struggles. And that's kind of why this is on my mind already. So when we started kind of venturing in that direction, I was like, hey, let's talk about this a little bit. Subject matter is pretty much that every family leaves its wounds. And how do we walk through life wounded, but not it's not completely focused on that, because I'm going to be talking about Joseph and getting his brother's jealousy and how their lies to their father crushed their father, and how Joseph saw the long-term redemption of that story. But I'm also going to talk about the father who brought his demon-possessed child and helped my unbelief. So you got the story of fathers, sons, and believers and people around them, because you got in the Joseph story, you've got his brothers. They're all impacted by the lie. And in the father's story, you've got the disciples who can't handle the demon. And so Jesus heals them and uses it as a teaching moment for all of them, as well as teaching the father to have greater faith. So when we look at that, so I'm gonna say this. So because we were talking about just how good we've been at this. So
What?
no, I'm just kidding. We haven't been. So our children have their own. So what kind of, no matter how good a family you are, this is the question I want to kind of drive at this weekend. And I'm asking you this question. Your research now.
Oh, okay.
Your research.
Yeah.
No matter how good at it we are, and we are pretty good at it.
Again, no. Keep going. What are you trying to ask?
Okay, I'm really good at it. I don't know what you. I can't speak for you. Anyway, you're really good at it. I'm not so hot at
Just
it. Anyway, as good as we think we might be, or as good as anyone thinks it might be. Opening salvo for my message is no, there is no perfect family. So where would you say that how, I think to some degree what we're talking about helps mitigate that we understood that we weren't perfect. So we tried to make avenues so that we could be flawed together. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking through this a little bit out loud, but so how would you say that? How would you see the question of knowing that we're not perfect? How has that impacted our parenting the most? And how has that
first of
impacted
all,
our
because
kids?
I've always believed that kids catch who you are, not what you say. So knowing I'm not perfect, knowing I have to lean on Jesus for literally life, because I can't even make a decision, get up in the morning and do anything right. It doesn't feel like I have to have him set my head on straight, be my very thoughts and existence. And if that's true, then I'm praying that's what my kids catch. First of all, that I'm not telling them I know how to do life, so listen to me. I'm telling them, here's some parameters I'd like for you to consider, because these have been safety nets for me as well. My mother or daddy or whoever taught me. But then also that and being the authority or the wisdom that they have in front of them, that they'll see and watch my life. So we've talked about this before. It's more important that you be who you believe your children ought to be around them, because you can't make them be something that you aren't. They're gonna be, from the character you produce, who you are. That's just a point of life. So if it comes down to there's a hypocritical thing, kids see that really quickly. You've even said about your own home that you went to church. There was a church mindset about things. There was a obligatory, whatever kind of church attendance. But when you would be at home, you didn't necessarily see that as a strength of a walk with Christ, right? There wasn't a strong example of that.
I didn't see it as similarly as I expected it would look. I didn't see it at home the way I imagined it should be, because at that point in time, I didn't have any other role models. When I went to college and saw a friend of mine's family, I had a role model. And so then I saw, oh, wait, this is more like what I think it should be. And I've met other families like that since then. And we've tried to be a family like that. And I think you're right.
Well, even if it's just knowing that you don't have the answers, you've got to go to someone else for the answers. I believe that's how I want my children to see me and see themselves. Not thinking they have the answers, but somebody outside of them, somebody wiser has to have those.
Well,
knowing that salvation does not come from myself and my own behavior, that also has to translate to my children. Salvation and going to heaven to be with Jesus, who loves you the most of anything, is not going to come from your behavior. It's going to be about trusting in him. Those kinds of slight nuances, but I want to live that way too.
I was going to say, so is it fair to say, if you think that you are trying to manage your children such that they don't make the mistakes that you made, is probably not a good approach.
No, I don't think it is.
Number one,
and
you don't know how to avoid the mistakes you made because you made those mistakes.
You made them anyway. That's right.
Yeah, but on top of that, the whole point of what I'm trying to get at is you can't make your child into something that you're not. A better child, a perfect child.
No,
your child is only going to be who you are. So if you want your child to be better, you need to work on you. You need to work on your relationship with Christ, because that's what I'm kind of hearing in this conversation. Well, the kids catch who you are, not what you say, right? So if you are living and leaning on Jesus in the worst of times, when your child has a tragic moment in their life, they're going to come to you and say, how did you get through something like this? And you can either say, well, dear, I haven't been through that. I'm mortified that you even have. Or you're going to say, oh man, I kind of remember when I went through something similar. Hopefully it's never anything too terrible.
Yeah.
But I think if your children feel like they can trust you along the way, and mine did, ours did. I had my children tell me some things that absolutely I wish I didn't know. But they came to us, and that was I think there was something about that they saw we were broken and we were trusting Jesus for those moments.
You never display strength that you don't have. So if you are weak, then you have to look to the one who is strong. That's how I believe children are. Children are always weak and they feel weak. If you yourself are depending on the one who is strong, but you don't pretend to be strong. So many parents want to make all kinds of promises to their kids, and they can't fulfill them. To me, that's a silly error that can be avoided. You don't make the promises of something you can't promise, but you can certainly look to the one who promised everything, promised to be their provider, promised to be their fortress, their refuge, and every way their protector. You can look to him. Otherwise, and then you are also a weak child with them. And that to me is just like, I think what we're trying to accomplish with public school, which is ridiculous. But when we put peers together, we think, oh, they'll learn best. But the idea of that I'm a learner also. I want my child to know I'm never going to know it all, but I do know the one who knows it all. And so if I'm seeking him, then I'm praying they're coming along behind me seeking him.
Wait, are we saying that what we want to model for our children is that we depend on someone greater than ourselves, i.e. Jesus?
Yeah,
and that's really
exactly
the key to it all. And we don't have all the answers to everything. And Daddy can't fix everything and Mommy can't fix everything.
Exactly. And we talked about submission a little while back too. There's a submission factor too. If we're submitted to a higher authority that has for us the best in mind and yet would ask of us things that seem difficult or against the norm of society or culture or whatever, then that might also cause my child to say, oh, I can be submissive to the parents that I don't get, that don't make sense, that are ridiculous or whatever. But there's a safety net there. If they watch us submit
there's a
to
whole
something
other conversation there.
I read this scripture this morning. Whoever heeds instruction is on the path to life, but he who rejects reproof leads others astray. Proverbs 10, 17, I think. Anyway, I think the idea that we were taught that authority is a safety net, it's a protection, it's something worthy to be respected and therefore heeded or obeyed. There's a kindness in that for us to teach our children that, because as they trust us, they begin to trust God. So as they watch us trust God and not ourselves, and not even have the answers for why, some of this whole, well, why do I need to do that? You always say, just because I said so. Well, you could say, I don't know actually why you need to do that, but you need to do it because I have to submit to authorities I don't get either.
It shouldn't be because I told you so, although none of us are not guilty of that once in a while, just in a frustrated moment. But it should be I need you to trust me right now. I'll explain it another day.
Right.
Because that's really what you're saying. Because how oftentimes have we had to say, I don't know what's happening in this moment.
Yeah.
But I'm trusting in the Lord, because that's what you want. When they catch it, so you want them to you want to model that for them, so that because here's the thing about it is I hope that we've demonstrated in our life with our children is that we trust God no matter how difficult it is, and we trust that on the other side it'll be beneficial for everyone involved.
Yeah. Exactly.
And beneficial doesn't always mean what we wanted. Beneficial means what is beneficial.
And that's what I think I saw in. I don't know if we should name them in the Basler family. They were an example of that. I could tell that with their own children. Not lording it over, making them feel like they knew everything, but they were with their children in life, and you could tell they would walk with them. They would give them the advice when they want it, but not necessarily do everything for them at the adult stage where they have to make their own decisions. But they were setting a good example, too, of being faithful people themselves, faithful to the Lord, faithful to each other, that kind of thing.
Right.
I think it goes about as far as you can go these days with the enemy's work all around us. That's as good as we've got. And then we've got our prayers for our family and for our children.
All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of another episode of Ask
Mom
and Dad. This has been fun. We've been talking just about community and family and examples and parenting. We've covered it all, so there's nothing else. We'll never have another episode again. I'm so glad you joined us here, and until next time, just keep on, right? They're clapping for us.
Keep